For you, the listeners of My JavaScript Story, Loot Crate is offering an opportunity to save 10% on any new subscription at lootcrate.com. Just enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. Loot Crate is one of my favorite things. Every month I get a box in the mail, costs less than $20, and it comes with all kinds of goodies. I have stuff from, just looking at my shelf, Batman, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles, Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and much, much more. So if you're a geek, a gamer, anything like that, and you want cool stuff to put around your office, cool t-shirts, comic books, etc., then definitely check out Loot Crate. To save 10% on your new subscription, go to lootcrate.com/Ruby. Again, that's lootcrate.com/Ruby to save 10% on any new subscription. Enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of My JavaScript Story. We're also going to put this on My Angular Story, so don't get confused. I'm here with Merrick Christensen. Merrick, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've been on a podcast. How are you, Chuck?
Doing all right. How are you?
Fantastic.
Now, you were a co-host on Adventures in Angular for a while.
No, it was JS Jabber.
Oh, was it JavaScript Jabber?
Yeah, I was on the first, huge window of episodes for JS Jabber.
Did we ever have you on Adventures in Angular? I could have sworn we did.
I was, going to be on Adventures in Angular, but that was when I was sort of transitioning out of Angular into the React space.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, anyway, it's great to have you back on the show and just, kind of find out where you're at now, what you're working on. Do you want to kind of give people an idea of where you're at?
Yeah, right now I work at a company called Webflow, and we try to empower people to create software without code. It's you can almost think of it like an alternative to Squarespace or a Wix, except for we give 100% design control. So you start out with a blank canvas, and you're basically writing HTML, CSS, JS with a visual editor.
Cool. That sounds really interesting.
Oh, I've loved it. Yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah, and that's a recent change for you, isn't it?
Yep, I switched over to Webflow a few months ago. Prior to that, I was at a company called Domo for 6.5 years.
Yep. Yeah, you were at Domo when I met you, and you worked with Joe there. So. Yep. Cool.
Yeah, that's how I met Joe and all the friends that we did ngConf together.
Yep. Well, let's back up and kind of capture your story from the beginning. Usually the first question that we ask is, how did you get into programming?
Yeah, so I started a band when I was 12, like a typical post Backstreet Boys, pre-emo band.
You were 12 post Backstreet Boys? Man, I am old.
Oh man, it was pretty ridiculous. The name of the band was Orpheus Jolt, which looking back, that we sunk our ship right from the get-go, naming it Orpheus Jolt. It's one of those look up a dictionary and merge the word with a Greek god, because those it was so epic. And I wanted to build a website for Orpheus Jolt. And Microsoft Front Page is what was sitting on the family computer. And so I just kind of pieced together a website through a visual editor.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it started there. It was pretty gruesome. I also learned that at the time you could only ship sites made in Front Page on an IIS server with a Front Page plugin, which was more expensive than all the other hosting options. Right. And I remember being so annoyed. And that's when my distaste for proprietary technology started.
Yeah, Microsoft's gotten a lot better about that kind of garbage.
They have. Microsoft is doing so many good things.
Yeah, but I remember, they were so evil because they charged a ton for all of that stuff.
Yeah, man, Orpheus Jolt, we couldn't afford it. We could not afford it.
Yep. So you were doomed to ignominy, huh?
Indeed. Honestly, front page is probably the reason my band didn't succeed. That's
There
probably
we go.
the sole reason.
Darn it, Microsoft.
Yeah, so started there. I moved on to Dreamweaver because I thought that's what the pros used.
Oh, yeah.
I come from a family that is incredibly supportive, though not technical, and and they also thought that's what the pros used. And yeah, my dad hooked me up with some freelance opportunities. I built a massage bed company's website in Salt Lake with Dreamweaver. And once I started getting like paid to create things, my mind was totally blown. I was like, if this makes enough money to be able to get by, this is what I want to do.
Right.
You know, and that was 13, 14, and it all went from there.
Wow, that's awesome. I kind of got into it when I was like 16 and 17, so at least web development. So yeah, that's pretty young.
Yeah, I think it was really, 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 really lucky. I've been interested in computers my whole life, and I saved up for half a computer, and my amazing dad bought the other half when I was 8. And I started out wanting to make stuff with PowerPoint, you know? And I can't tell you how many grown-ups I must have annoyed so much having them sit down and watch really dumb PowerPoints. They probably hated the idea of watching PowerPoints like everyone does.
Yep.
And yet they've got this like 8-year-old starry-eyed kid expecting them to sit there for like 2 hours and not get bored.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I started out with like PowerPoint, and then programming wasn't even in my consciousness until later on.
Awesome. So
in fact, I got my first like job. Yeah, my first job I didn't even get into until I didn't even know that people wrote code by hand. I started, and they gave me this editor called Homesite Plus. Have you ever used Homesite Plus?
Nope.
Oh man, it was like Macromedia's version of VS Code, I guess would be the Mac. And it was just a code editor. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? I can't build anything with this. And that was when I really started to actually have to code. It's when I got a job where they gave me an editor and they didn't give me Dreamweaver. It's like, oh crap, the jig is up.
That's awesome. So how did you get into JavaScript then?
I was able to move out of this company called Infogenix, where I was just doing HTML and CSS. And CSS then was not CSS today.
No.
It was like table layouts basically. I got what you might call world's greatest table layout abuser. It was a forte of all of us in that era, and ping fixes and the like. But if you could make a layout and you're like, it's so funny because you could show you that I'm going to copy and paste this paragraph like 6 times, and if you could show that your layout grew, people were like, no, he actually did it. A drop shadowed layout that grows. It was the bar was so much lower when I snuck into this operation. Anyways, so after Infogenix, where I was just doing HTML and CSS, I got this company in Utah where I live named Red Olive, and I emailed the CEO of Red Olive a few times, and I was just like, listen, I mean, in my head, they're like the coolest place in the universe to be. And they are an incredibly cool place. But I just hustled trying to get in there. And eventually I got them to reply to me and kind of give me a shot. And it's so funny for me to look back because it's still on the Red Olive blog. They have like this blog article about me that's like, this kid kept annoying us, and we're glad he was so persistent because it's worked out pretty well. Nice. But once I got to Red Olive, they actually gave me Flash, and I did Flash there for like a minute, and I came to JavaScript through ActionScript.
Uh-huh.
I did ActionScript two for a long while, about a year and a half.
Yep.
And as JavaScript got more performant, because historically JS was so slow that doing like animations and things like that were almost a non-starter. Like you couldn't. I remember the first time I saw Moo Tools. It was like Moo Tools 1.11 or something like that, and they had this thing called Moo effects. And it was basically animations, CSS animations on top of Moo Tools. And I was like, what? You don't have to have this plugin installed to do this. And that is how I got into JavaScript, was through ActionScript. I discovered Moo Tools, Moo effects.
Oh, nice. Yep.
And that changed the game for me. So then I stopped pitching Flash, I guess, like widgets. They're these embeddable animations. We started doing them in JS, and absolutely loved it. And through Moo Tools, I met a lot of great mentors.
That's awesome.
That really helped kind of elevate me out of my front page roots.
So how does this timing fit in with when Steve Jobs essentially announced that the iPhone wouldn't support Flash? Was this way before that then?
This was 2000. Well, I don't know when that was. It seems like I was past the Flash days enough that I was able to be snooty with everybody else and look. I don't remember feeling threatened when Steve Jobs did that. I remember feeling like, yeah, I'm done with that Flash Flex era. That was for scrubs,
That's funny.
Yeah. Flex was pretty legit. Flex was super legit, actually. It got me into these things called what they called rich internet applications, which basically got renamed to spas.
Yep.
Which are what everybody and their dog does now. But Flex kind of spearheaded that and tried to come up with, names and marketing around that notion of a client app that you could ship over the web that worked like a desktop app.
Yep. Yeah, I remember using some. And yeah, always interesting. I actually worked at a company that was doing Flex and Flash. Man, when was that? Like 2008? And it was, it was just interesting to see, okay, we're going to drop this in here and this in here and this in here, and it all ties together this way, and it talks to Rails, which was a pain. But yeah, eventually I think all of that went to JavaScript because Steve Jobs came out and said, no more Flash.
Rest in peace, Flash. Plus, if you had to integrate it with a backend, it was all XML, at least when I was doing it. And that was kind of a pain train.
Yeah, we had some other protocol that it was sending data back through and getting data from, and Rails wasn't really set up to send that format. So we were using experimental library to do it. And had
your own encoders?
No, somebody else had written it, but it had issues, and so we'd wind up patching it.
Oof. That sounds painful.
Yeah, so I have written ActionScript, not a lot, but funny. It's just funny to hear how that happened. Most people that I talked to that came from Flex and Flash, it was, Steve Jobs made his announcement and I started transitioning my career. So it's interesting to hear that you found it another way and realized that there was potential there. Of course, at the time, even Moo Tools really wasn't that mature, compared to what we have today. So what was it that brought you in and made you get excited about something like that? And why not like jQuery or, Prototype and Scriptaculous or any of the other ones that were out there at the time?
Oh man, I was such an anti jQuery. I remember being so sad because I was working at this agency, Riser Media, and I did everything in Moo Tools. I was very down with the object-oriented, thinking in terms of classes and composing said classes. And Moo Tools was fantastic at that. They had this incredible class-based system that was more powerful than what we have currently. with the ES 2015 classes. I mean, those are intentionally kind of pared down, but Moo Tools had this amazing class-based layer if you really cared a lot about the object-oriented code. And I just found the syntax and ability, like the way that Moo Tools made my code look and feel, because they extended built-ins. So they were able, Ruby was really trendy at the time, and Moo Tools was able to give you a very similar feeling because they extended built-ins to like a Ruby type like syntax.
Oh, nice.
And I was just very interested in expressiveness and conciseness and cleverness, all things that I'm really critical of now. But younger me was very into how magic and how flexible JavaScript was. Mm-hmm. I think the reason that I was able to sort of make the transition was a lot like you said. It was very difficult to integrate with content management systems, and this is before there were like dominant players.
Right.
Like WordPress really started to dominate after this era, but you had these XML files, or like you said, you have some weird way of trying to get dynamic content into Flash, and that was always really frustrating, trying to integrate with backend systems and get that information into Flash. And JavaScript, we just had JSON support really early on, and it just was a very natural way to build, I guess, dynamic content. And then why the jQuery Moo Tools thing? jQuery was still under the worldview that you should just render everything on the server and enhance it a little bit with some plugins. And I just had a kind of a distaste for how messy that code got and gets.
Yeah.
And Moo Tools was what seemed like it was a lot more interested in maintainability and engineering rigor, if you will.
Makes sense. So you were doing Moo Tools and stuff. At what point did you get into Angular?
I got into Angular. We did that was after I had gone to this company Domo and had the opportunity to help kind of lay down the groundwork for this single page application. And we had done it all with AMD and Backbone.
Right.
Which felt quite natural coming out of the Moo Tools world, because Backbone also offered like a class type abstraction. And we ended up hiring Dave Geddes and Aaron Frost and Joe Eames, a bunch of really prolific Angular types. And they came in and were interested in switching our application over from like the Backbone AMD stack into an Angular JS stack. And so I got introduced to Angular through them.
Awesome. So what was it that made Domo want to pick Angular?
I think it was very trendy at the time to switch to Angular, especially because you had these real issues with Backbone around like key value observation getting so out of hand, where like this model fires this event that fires this event on this model, and this event on this model fires this event. And each of those were happening in different turns of the event loop. And so state changes became really intractable. And keeping the view up to date was also a really manual process with Backbone. There was sort of this notion of like, wire my model up deliberately to a handler and grab my element and change the content myself. And so Angular just provided a way more concise way of doing a lot of the things that were more verbose in Backbone. And I think the other thing is Domo is going into one of those let's hire a whole bunch of people modes, and Angular being more structured and less homegrown, I think makes hiring people a lot easier. Like that's one of the stories for, I think, modern versions of Angular 2 is you have a more comprehensive or like all-encompassing solution that makes onboarding people easier because it's not like a home engineered stack, so to speak. And the testability. Joe in particular was very interested in test-driven development, and he Angular being built around a dependency injector makes that model, that style of development, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Because you can essentially inject dummies in there and then just make sure that the right thing got called without worrying about whether or not it works as well.
Totally. And it's also, I mean, I've because of my days with Angular, I've come to believe that injecting is like, or rather mocking is kind of a code smell. Like testing encapsulation and not implementation details seems to give you a lot more bang for the buck. But yeah, Angular makes that test a specific unit, regardless of whether or not the internals are private or not, like really straightforward.
Makes sense. So you're working at Domo, you're doing Angular, life's good, and I'm aware that you've since adopted React. And I know somebody's going to be like, oh. But, I find that, people usually have reasons for changing frameworks. And in a lot of cases, that they're interesting things to dive into. So why React? Was it just that you changed jobs to a company doing React? Or were there specific things about the framework that you just got excited about?
No, I actually started a new code base at Domo about 3 years ago, and I chose to start it with React. Clear back then. And there's some primary reasons. I found a lot of the key value observation that was frustrating to me with Backbone. You also had with Angular scopes. Scopes are kind of this implicit dependency, and that became intractable. But another big reason was just I really lost confidence in the idea of templates in general. Writing things in like some sort of DSL that then compiles into JS, whereas React just giving you JS reminded me a lot more of, I guess, my days with Moo Tools, but not having any limitations around how I could express those kinds of things. I also kind of feel like I got very convinced that two-way data binding was not worth its weight. And lastly, the ability to build React into bundles that are like easily code split and isolated is just insane because it's so each component is so encapsulated depending on how you decide to architect it. Like I just felt more freedom to architect it how I wanted to, and that I could ship a more efficient bundle and not trade in maintainability cost for those traits. So to me, React just fit a lot better my mental model for how to build client-side applications. And still does. I've really, I don't know that I've been happier with a library and ecosystem in my 10 years of doing this than I have React.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I hear people talk about how, well, this framework's faster, or this framework, is better at these kinds of apps. And I find that that's generally not true. It really does come down to the way that you think about and architect your apps. And some people prefer one way over the other. But most of these frameworks do really well with 80 to 90% of the problem space out there. And you may find that you're in that other 10% where one of these is going to really shine and the others won't. But Yeah, it's just interesting to me to see, okay, so what are the trade-offs that matter to Merrick?
Yeah, it's interesting because I used to think that this was something that could be pursued in this objective, let's think about the problem. And what we do is we look at some design and we think, okay, here's the problem space for this design, this Photoshop file, this sketch file, whatever it is you may receive. And you design your technical architecture out from that, right?
Yep.
And we try to pretend like we're not humans and be incredibly we debate with all these like biases that we won't bring to the surface because we're kind of embarrassed of them. And I think that programming is very much still an art form in that you can't separate it from the people that are going to be writing the code, and how your team's philosophies and ideals and communication structure should all be considered into how you architect your code technically. And it's interesting because companies don't often think about like, hey, how does this company plan to grow? Are we going to acquire a bunch of companies? If we're going to acquire a bunch of companies, it might make sense to architect our code technically that allows for more isolated, sub companies within our company. Or are we going to ask people to assimilate, in which case we might optimize for a really well documented, really comprehensive framework. And architecting your code technically for the business's life cycle rather than like one specific expression of the problem is something that I hadn't even considered until like 8 or 9 years into doing this, because I think it brings in a whole bunch of subjectivity that's really uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And it's funny because I still see people go to the camps, the Vue camp or the React camp or the Angular camp. And I find that that's usually counterproductive because then you're not having the conversations about how you do code. So,
oh man, it's given me this massive amount of respect for languages like Go, and some of these where they're intentionally boring and intentionally underfeatured because they don't want your team to waste time talking about whether you're going to use, an FP heavy style or a mutation heavy style or an imperative style, whatever it may be, because every team, it's so funny, you switch companies and every team is having the same discussions. And you have different people from these sub camps arguing the same points that are all written about ad nauseum in the form of medium think pieces and snarky tweets. And it just is daunting to think of how much money and time and energy and emotional energy goes into battling kind of minute technical details that it makes me wonder if there's not things we can do technically or mechanistically to lower the risk of technical decisions such that you don't have the winner take all debates in every single company. And that's one of those things where maybe technical architecture could be an answer to trying to create safer, less risky ways for people to adopt new tech.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now?
Yeah, I'm working on Webflow, which I've absolutely loved. It turns out every company I've worked to, I've gravitated to some sort of like architecture type team or design system team. And I realized that I really love to solve meta problems, like rather than build a website, building a tool that helps people build websites, or like in some of the open source projects, rather than like, writing tests, building some tools that help other people write tests. Like I really enjoy that meta layer, and Webflow's been an amazing company because that's what the product is, right? We try and make this amazing platform, the internet. Mm-hmm. We try to remove barriers for people to be able to actually create for it. Like it's the most amazing thing that's happened to mankind in terms of just the ability to express and reach a massive audience with limited energy. And yet the number of people that can still meaningfully express their ideas onto the internet, there's this huge barrier of learning how to code.
Yeah.
And some people are coming at that from teaching people how to learn how to code, and some people are coming at that from like a tooling angle. And Webflow is definitely trying to empower anybody to be able to create things without code. And I've just enjoyed the problem space a lot. The company has been really wonderful to work for too. It's my first time remote. I've never worked a remote job before in my life, and I've actually really enjoyed that too. So it's been an amazing product to work on too.
Awesome. Yeah, I need to check it out. Joe mentioned it on the last JavaScript Jabber, and he said that for one of his projects, he actually just put the page up on Webflow. And with the remote conferences and some of the other things that I'm doing where, I have sort of short-lived content pages, and I don't really need like a full-on back end like I get with WordPress. I just need speaker pictures up and a place for people to register.
Yeah.
It sounds like that would be a good fit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We also have like a whole CMS thing too, if you want it, right? Like if you want the dynamic notion. But Webflow started out as sort of a landing page builder, exactly like what you're talking about, for more ephemeral one-off pages, and just kind of growing in scope to try to empower more people to do more things. Yeah.
That's cool. So do you have any side projects that you're working on, or anything that you're particularly excited to talk about there? Or
it's kind of funny that we scheduled this today, because we're announcing Framework Summit today, which is a conference that we're putting together, a few of us in the JavaScript world, Joe being one of them. And it's going to be an awesome event in Park City, where we're kind of having a meeting of the frameworks, if you will, trying to talk about what commonalities there are across different tools. Like, for example, WebAssembly is going to be this game changer for the web in general. And what does that mean for us as a whole, as an ecosystem? And so creating an event that brings people from each of these different communities into our larger JavaScript community to have some interesting conversations and to kind of learn about some of the innovations in the other worlds, if you will. So I've been working on that, and I'm excited because I stepped out of NGConf 2 years ago. So I haven't organized an event for a little bit, and happy to be helping with this one.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. I mean, for one, I think we generally talk about sort of the big three frameworks out there, Angular, which has been around for a while, React, which has kind of taken over, and then Vue, which is kind of up and coming. And then we don't really talk about a lot of the other options, but there are other options that are doing interesting things. Dojo, for example, we've had them on JavaScript Jabber. And, some of these other folks who are still doing interesting things with frameworks that we've kind of moved on from generally in the community, like Backbone. So it's just interesting to see, these different points of view and get what we can from having conversations with people who look at code different from how we do.
Oh, so true. So true. And getting some of those common people, like Webpack or some of the browser vendors involved too. Because there's quite a bit of overlap in each of these things. Like, it's so funny how you can jump across the different tools and there's different names for the same ideas. So I think it'll hopefully help people, cross-pollinate ecosystems and ideas.
Awesome. Well, the last part of this show is picks.
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
Do you have some things you want to shout out about?
Yeah, picks were my favorite part about JS Jabber. When I was on JS Jabber with you, I was like, oh man, the guests are really amazing, but the picks, that was the fun part.
You're not the only person I've heard that from. A lot of people really like the picks. They're like, I learned something and then I find out about really cool stuff.
Yeah. So my first pick would be the picks model of your podcast. It's a meta pick.
That's got to be a first.
My pick is the picks. The second pick is this incredible hip hop artist named Sho Baraka. He's just fantastic. He's got kind of like a chill vibe, but he's a wordsmith. Can't recommend him enough. And my last pick would be this game called Grid Critters. If you go, I think it's gridcritters.com.
Uh-huh.
It is, have you played it? I don't know if you've played it.
I haven't played it. We had Dave on the show. He talked about it. So.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Man. It's pretty darn cool. It's got me thinking about different ways of, more meaningful ways of making education into games. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Gridcritters.com. Or Flexbox Zombies if you want to learn that one.
Yeah. Flexbox Zombies is free, isn't it? And then Grid Critters is a paid course /game.
Yeah. They're games, but they're you learn through them. It's kind of like a turn-based game almost. It feels like it's pretty darn cool.
Yeah, they're really interesting to dive into. And I think he gave out a coupon code, so go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway. Yeah, and Dave is also an organizer of NGConf, and you know him pretty well. So
yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to dive in with a few picks here. So I'm down at NG Atlanta right now, which is a conference out here in Atlanta. It's kind of fun when I travel down here because I wind up hanging out with my cousins for a couple days when I come to Atlanta.
Nice.
And that's always fun. And Lyft is just an awesome way to get around. I've really had no problem, and it's not terribly expensive. I can't even imagine what an actual cab would have cost me to get around. But anyway, so I'm going to pick Lyft. And then the other thing that I'm going to pick, I've been doing these reviews of devices that folks have sent me after CES, because I went to CES in January. And one of the ones that I just recorded an unboxing of, and I've been playing with a bit, is called GameVice. And what it is it's basically joystick controls for your iPhone. And so you slide your phone into it. It has a lightning connector. They also make them for Android. So you can, that has the mini USB or whatever it is, micro USB. I can't remember which is which. But anyway, so you slide your phone into it. And then when you're playing games, like I've been playing Final Fantasy IX, you'd use the joysticks and the buttons instead of swiping your finger across the screen.
Oh, sweet.
It's so nice.
That's been one of the deal breakers.
So nice.
Yeah, half the mobile games are like non-starters because of the touch controls.
Yeah. I mean, the touch controls work, but they're just weird.
They're weird because you're over what you're looking at. Like your thumb's over the top of,
Yeah. So, I mean, there have been like one or two things where I actually had to touch the screen in order to play, but for the most part, I've just been able to use the joystick. And, so you have the finger pads to move and the plus with the arrows on it, and then you have all the buttons, and you have the buttons on the top. So it's kind of like an Xbox controller or basically like an Xbox controller that you stick your phone into. And so
that's awesome. That's so cool.
So I'm going to pick that as well. And I've been really happy with it. And then lastly, while I'm traveling, I have kind of a setup for recording. I mean, I don't know if people can really tell. I'm sure you can hear a difference between what I usually sound like and what I sound like now. since I'm in the hotel room, I'm using the Audio-Technica 2100, and it'll do USB and XLR. And anyway, it just connects all this stuff pretty easily. And then I just have my AirPods in so I can hear Merrick without it blasting through my speakers back into the microphone. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with the whole setup, and it works pretty well. So if you have to have a travel mic, or you're looking for a kind of a less expensive microphone to get started podcasting with, I recommend this one. So anyway, one last thing, Merrick.
Yeah.
If people want to find you on Twitter, or if you have a blog or things like that, where do they go?
I am Merrick, twitter.com/I am Merrick, or my website's just merrickchristensen.com. But especially on Twitter, if you hit me up, I will absolutely reply. I love talking to people and trying to help people.
All right, cool. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we will talk to you later.
Cool. Thanks, Chuck.
Yep.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.